For this video, we are going to do the Cowhide tumbler. Cowhide here, chunky glitter there. Got 15 milliliters of epoxy in here. I've got it nice and stirred up, and then I put several drops of opaque epoxy tint. I've got my cup base painted, but I'm just not 100% confident in how good the coverage is here. So I've just got this where we're just going to do a nice thick layer right there. Not worried about the bottom because that is going to be covered up with a kind of a tealy turquoisey mix. Once again, it's a glitter from Franz. It's one that I've used many times called Zoe. So cute. So I've got that very thoroughly mixed and then tinted and then more thoroughly mixed the rest of the way. So we're going to turn on the turner and hope I don't blow a fuse because it is really cold here in Texas. We went straight from summer, kind of thought about having a fall, and then it was 23 degrees when I got up this morning. Not my favorite time of year. So this is just going to go on as thick as we need it. It doesn't have to be super duper thick, but I just want to make it a very solid white base. Anytime you spray paint, it ends up getting those spots that just aren't nearly as covered as the other areas are, and I'm on a time crunch with this one, so I can't really afford any mistakes on it. So after we do this, I'm going to heat it, get it nice and runny and smooth. I don't really have too many air bubbles, which is kind of surprising given the temperature, but I did heat my epoxy up beforehand. So I'm just going to continue doing this. I'm going to try and make this video a little shorter, so I'm going to cut off in between steps so that I don't have it running an hour like I did the fabric tutorial. So I'm just going to do this and then heat it up, smooth it out like I've done in all the other alcohol ink tutorials, and then we'll be back when it's time to do the next step. So here we are, step 2. We've got our epoxy cured right here. We used the white epoxy dye in there. I've got a few little spots here and there that don't have perfect coverage, but that's okay because I'm taking my chunky glitter up to about right here when we get to that point. So I have a water slide. It's not quite big enough, wide enough to go all the way around. I'm lacking about that big of a space, kind of tapering down. I've never done a water slide quite this big, so I am really hoping for the best because I'm on a time crunch, like I said earlier. So this is laser, so I am going to use my handy dandy assistant here and just do, hopefully, oh my gosh, I hope it works out because I really don't have time. And once again, I'm out in my shed, so I don't have access to do all this at my sink. So I've got warm water here. Just gonna do enough that my water slide gets wet. So I've got this cut to just a little bit over. I'm okay if it goes this way and it wrinkles because I'm really not concerned. Like I said, I'm going to go up and over with my glitter here. So, whew, here we go. I'm really nervous because I've never done one this big. Got my little silicone brush here. That's to get the water off of it once we get it in there. I think I'm gonna go slowly but surely this way, but it's laser, so I'm gonna do it this way, and that should help quite a bit. So here goes nothing. Hold on to it so that it does not curl up on you. And you want it on there long enough, you want it in the water long enough to kind of hydrate the back. We definitely want our cup wet. It's much easier to manipulate when it's wet and not dry. So I'm about to get water all over my workspace, and I'm okay with that. So I'm gonna go this way, get it up to the top here. Gonna work my way around. I care more about the top than I do the bottom at this point. And I can always cut off excess. I can't put it back on though. And it's already sliding off of the paper. I'm really nervous. I really am on a time crunch with this one. And I've never done it this big before. So I'm going to get this and just work it down. Get all those air bubbles out. Work it all the way to the end. Top to bottom, all the way. I can cut that easy peasy. Not a problem. After it's nice and dry, I'll get that on there. I'll pull that a little tighter. There we go, that's better. Hopefully if I end up with any wrinkles, hopefully I can cover it with the name decal that will go on here towards the end here. So we're just going to smooth it out. I think I'm gonna have to make like a rim right there. I apologize, I'm gonna be a little bit more quiet on this video than I normally am, just because I kind of don't really know what I'm doing on this, to be honest. That seems a little helpful. I'll rotate this around a little bit more. My biggest concern is try not to let it curl up on itself. I'm not ever successful at uncurling it when it does that. I usually end up having to slice it with a blade to try and get that curled corner off of my water slides. I much prefer smaller water slides over these just because it's nerve-wracking. I really hope this is visible. We're gonna find out. Once I get the hang of these, I'll definitely do a few more tutorials, but this is a cup that I have to get done for an order, so I thought, why not record it? If I fail, I won't post it. If I'm a success, it'll be helpful to somebody somewhere, sometime. So as I'm going, I'm watching for bubbles, wrinkles. I'm not really worried about that. I'm more worried about the top and sides. I think I'm gonna just have to make a lip at the top, even though I don't really want to. Maybe I'll throw a little matching glitter up there to hide it. And maybe once it dries, maybe I'll hit it with my heat gun in a little while and see if that shrinks it. Wouldn't that be convenient? Do it like a heat shrink, like Shrinky Dinks. Man, that would be convenient. So you can see how big of a space I have remaining here. I'm not super duper worried because I printed 2 of these because I was worried about screwing one of them up. And so in a minute, I'm gonna actually find which part of the pattern matches up the best, and then cut it to fit, and then we'll squeeze it in there in a little bit. But first I want to try and get this part as smooth as possible. I'm going to definitely have to do some camouflage action here. You can kind of see that. So I'm just going to continue going around this and double checking. There's an air bubble right there. I'm just going to go around this and check for air bubbles, make sure nothing major is happening here. If you're using your arm as your turner as your assistant, make sure when you're turning it, you're not unscrewing it, because that is exactly what I was doing just now. Gotta watch that, because it would suck if it dropped and dented the cup and all that bad stuff. Not sure what I'm going to be able to do about that top right there. That curve just a little bit too much. I don't really like that. But again, I'll see if I can't shrink it. I don't think this particular material works like a shrinky dink, but I'm going to try it in a minute. So I've got pretty good coverage. I've got just one little wrinkle right there that's going to bother me. Maybe I'll go up a little higher on the glitter in that spot. We'll see. But anyways, I think I'm going to end up trimming that right there all the way around. So that is that. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to measure out my other piece in just a second. I wonder if some people are able to find 11 by 14, because I cannot imagine how people do a full wrap water slide on a cup this size. But I see people do it all the time, so I know it's possible. So I'll be back in just a little bit to work on that next step. I'm gonna try this again. The first piece of this that I cut was a fail. I won't pester you with that. So I've got this cut pretty good. I've got to watch the direction of the fiber. Of course, it's not actually fiber. It's just the textured look of it. So this piece, because of the way it is, I'm actually going to do it this way, not reversed. So it should have a decent seam. I'm really hoping for the best here. Letting that soak enough to get the back released. This is my least favorite way of doing water slide. I really prefer to do it backwards. It's so much easier for me. So I'm going to start sliding that off of there just so that it doesn't roll up on me. Got my cup wet. Let's go ahead and get you a little bit wetter. I don't feel like that's sliding as easily as it should. All right, try that again. I'm more concerned with this darker seam right here because this is kind of transparent because there wasn't really any color there. So that's pretty decent. I'm gonna go up just a tiny bit right here. That was not a tiny bit. Can you see that? It's real obvious right there. I really hope to put the start of her name right here because I think hopefully under epoxy this won't be super duper noticeable here because that's decently lined up and decently close to the same coloring right there. But this is real obvious, very, very obvious. But the name, I think it's Angie going on here. So I'm gonna put the A right there so that hopefully it takes it up. I'm waiting on my customer to tell me if she's okay with the idea of a band of glitter around here. That'll really help camouflage this. We'll see. I think the other cups that I've seen done were done more in a black and white than they were in this kind of brindle and brown color, and that really helps because then the clear spots, like that spot right there, had zero ink. So it really blends well to the base epoxy. I don't know how, but I totally have a piece of glitter under there. Glitter's the devil, man. It's in all the spots you don't want it to be. And I did experiment with the heat gun. I wouldn't do it. I just kind of blasted it a little bit with this guy right around here just to experiment. It wrinkled it up, but not in a nice shrinky dink kind of way. More of a withered up, you just burned it kind of way. But that's why I started here with the part that was going to be covered up with glitter. So that is that. I'm just gonna kind of wipe off the water. Use my shirt as an apron. Nothing wrong with that. Just going real gentle so I don't accidentally catch it with my ring or my fingernail or anything like that. But there's water on it from that last piece that I just placed. Ugh, gravity. There's like one giant roll of water, drop of water that's just rolling all around. So that is all I've got for that part. I'm gonna let it dry completely. Then I'm gonna trim this up. I'm not real thrilled about this, but I do feel like that camouflages pretty decently right there. You can see that. It's pretty decently camouflaged. I'm gonna have to cover that with the decal. So we'll be back to it the next steps after this dries completely. So this is pretty dry. I feel like it anyways. I went ahead and just took my X-Acto knife and just kind of slid it around, and then I pulled all that excess off. I'm about to cover all that with glitter anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I just thought, what if it peekaboos? I'd rather be one step safe rather than sorry. So I have 15 milliliters of epoxy mixed up. I don't need that much, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. I like to do a thicker coating when I apply epoxy method with chunky glitter. We're going to use this one right here. It's called Zoe. Of course, from Franz, like usual. So I'm going to put a decently thick layer on here and let it rotate for a few minutes, and then epoxy or sprinkle that glitter on there. So, and I'll do better with this going the other direction, so I'm going to make it spin. Put something down to catch any drips, unless you have a work surface that just really doesn't matter. So right now I'm going right below the water slide. I'm trying to be like extra cautious to not accidentally roll it up. So I'm just going to kind of do that. Kind of dab it up like that. Go down like that. I just like to do a full rotation of doing that same movement. I'm going to go a little higher here. I don't need it super duper thick, but I definitely don't want it really, really thin either. I'll do a little bit more down here. I don't really have any keychains that I'm working on right now. My craft show's just literally in a day and a half, so whatever I make tonight won't be ready for that anyways. So I'm probably not going to do anything with the leftover epoxy, except for maybe add some glitter and throw it in the Lego man. It's getting pretty full. It's about 75% of the way full. I think it'll make a cute little conversation piece on my sales tables. I have the one ready, but working on another one. Just something better to do with the leftover epoxy that's not enough to put in an actual mold on its own, but too much to really justify wasting it when you can kind of put it to good use that way. Not for any other purpose except for entertainment. Alright, so I'm going to go back up to the top here. I'm going to do that. I'm not worried about that little debris right there. That's actually from me as applying the water slide the way I did. It's the laser jet and I did it face down. So that's just extra ink residue. So I'm just going to kind of do that. Get it up a little bit higher. I'm going to kind of camouflage some of these wrinkles for sure. Smooth that out just a bit. I don't want it to end up really, really thick on the top part, so I'm okay with it being kind of thinner right there. But I definitely want it thicker in these parts that it's going to grab hold. Okay, so I started with 15 milliliters. I still have almost 10. It's above 7.5, but below the 10. So I've got my glitter catch pan. I don't really need the bigger one. I still haven't cleaned out the other glitter out of it. So this works. So I'm going to take the lid off of it so I can dump it a little easier. Kind of let this spin in a way that it's kind of leveled out. I don't know if you can see, but I have paint drips on here, and I'm not worried about those because they're about to be covered up. So we are going to do this right here. Catch it on the other side there. Go up just a little bit more on this rotation. Anywhere that there's not epoxy, it's going to fall right off. So I'll work on sprinkling that in just a bit. So we're going to go ahead and do the rest of this here. In a minute, we're going to let it turn for about 30 minutes. And I'm going to pat down any spots that it might have that might be sticking up, or maybe even sprinkle on a little bit more to cover up any bald spots that might have popped up. I do my bottoms kind of weird. If you've seen any of my other videos, I don't know if this is how other people do it, but sometimes I don't even do the bottom, but on this one I am, because I don't really have a better plan for it. Oops, I keep hitting it. In a minute, when I pat down the edges there, it'll help ensure that we don't have big, huge lumps sticking up. Got kind of a bare spot there. Wait for that to come back around and take care of it. What I like about this particular glitter mix, there may be other glitters that do it too, but it's got several different sizes. Give that a second to focus. It's not really going to focus. Anyways, it's got several different sizes. Pretty sure it's 3 sizes. I'm just kind of sprinkling this here. I'm getting it as close to the one that she sent me for inspiration as possible, without exact duplication. Do your own thing. If you get a cup for reference, just tell your person I'll get as close as I can without an exact duplication, because I mean that's kind of like ripping off another artist. I mean, because if you think about it, we're creating these things, which is kind of like art. There. So that hid most of our, or all of our wrinkles right in here. Once this cures, I'll blow off the excess that's up here, because I don't really want it up there. Unless she tells me that yes, she wants a band, but I really don't think that's going to work. I think I'm going to just end up with a white lip right there, which is fine. Just kind of gives it a clean edge. So I'm going to leave this be for about 30 minutes, and then I'll show you how to pat it down. Alright, this has been spinning just a little bit. I don't think you can see it on camera. Maybe as it comes around. Let me get this busy background out of the way. Maybe as it comes around, you can kind of see a few jaggedy spots sticking up. Gloved hands, just very gently tap down the spots that are sticking up. I feel like this is the biggest problem area for me. It will make them lay down flat, or it will slide it up just a little bit. I'm not pushing hard, just a little bit. So I'm getting a little stuck to my glove. I'm gonna wipe that off before I come up to this other spot. Just kind of go like that really, really gently. If you push too hard, you'll move your glitter and it'll just make a big ugly spot. So I don't need a ton right there. Got a little bit to address right there. And you won't be able to make every piece lay down. If you are, you're better than some, because it just doesn't always work out. So I'm gonna just do that the whole way around and give a little bit special attention to the top part there. So a spot there that needed it. In the morning, I'm gonna come check on this and I'm gonna clear coat it. I'll spray paint it with clear coat. Just whatever I have handy. I've got Krylon and Rust-Oleum. I kind of bounce back and forth between the two. I don't think it really matters. Alright, so really gently right there. Ooh, make sure that you don't have your hand right there, because I just kind of tapped that and I probably need to fix it now. Alright. That's it. Let's make sure we didn't mess up the bottom here. Nope, I must have just barely tapped it enough to feel it, but not enough to do harm. So some of this you're not going to be able to get it to lay flat just because there's other pieces under it and it just can't. But they're connected somehow, either with epoxy or it's part of a strand or something. So we're going to let that cure. I'm going to set my timer for it to go off in about 5 hours. I'll go ahead and put my heat lamp on it too. Just because it's pretty cold here. It's hovering in the 40s right now. Yesterday it was like 22 degrees whenever we got up, but this morning wasn't so bad because it wasn't windy or anything. So we're going to turn that on. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do here. Kind of waiting for my customer to call me or message me back to see if she's interested in that. I'm pretty sure we're not gonna. I said that just a few minutes ago, but just repeating that. I haven't seen one with a band across the top, so I don't know what it'll look like. I bet it would be pretty, but I just don't know. We'll see. So that's it for tonight. We're gonna let this cure. I'm gonna put my heat lamp on it, rotate it over so that it lines up like it needs to without burning down my she shed, because we all know what happens with that. So we'll be back. Okay, so our epoxy is cured here and our water slide is completely dry. So my customer finally got back to me. I say finally, it was not that long. That she's totally okay with putting a thin band of this across the top. I think it'll be super cute and it'll kind of set it apart from some of the other stuff that I've seen out there. I don't want my stuff to look exactly like someone else's. So I'm going to take my blade and just make a really thin lip right here, because I want my epoxy to touch the cup, not the water slide as its base. And that's the only reason I'm going to trim that off, not for cosmetic purposes. So I'm going to speed that part up. Okay, so I trimmed that. Go slow, because holy moly, my heart stopped when that ripped right there. But I'm about to cover it up with glitter, so I'm not completely heartbroken about it. So since I don't really have time for a full-blown epoxy cure and setup, I'm gonna do this part with Mod Podge. But I did see two little spots that needed some attention. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock those out really quickly. Right there, it looks like an air bubble popped, and one other spot. So I'm gonna address that before I do anything else. And it's not gonna hurt that I'm doing Mod Podge here after doing epoxy underneath it. So I'm gonna get just a tiny little dab. I have a medicine cup with a tiny bit of Mod Podge because I really don't need much at all. So I'm just gonna dab that on there like that. And then I have my glitter tray from earlier, aka last night. And I'm just gonna kind of tap that on there. When I clear coat it, it will kind of hold it in place. Thought I saw one, yep, right there. One more little bald spot right there. Nothing major, but since I can fix it, I need to. Be a different story if I didn't see it, which really wouldn't be good because we should be checking them before we send these out when someone paid for them. Maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve and a little bit of allowance there if you're pretty new at it, but really it needs to be paid attention to. So I'm going to do the rim, and then we're going to let it cure and then clear coat it. All right, so that's all I'm gonna do as far as that goes. This looks a lot more intense than it really is. I think it's kind of cute. I'm gonna start the name right here just so it hides that seam. This seam isn't so bad. There's a tiny couple of wrinkles in there. I'm really hoping that maybe those won't be so noticeable, but I'm gonna start the name right there just so that it is kind of a distraction there, since most of it'll be hidden by glitter. So that's all we're gonna do right now until this Mod Podge dries, and then I will hit it with the clear coat. Of course, I'm gonna brush that off first before I do that. All right, so that is nice and dry from last night. I've clear coated it quite thoroughly. You don't wanna clear coat it so much that it's literally dripping off, but enough that your glitter won't move. And the one thing about chunky glitter is it has something on it. I read somewhere that it has something on it that keeps it from clumping. So that also repels your epoxy. So if you don't put a clear coat of some sort over it, it will repel your epoxy so bad. And it'll make these huge, huge craters. Fish eyes is an understatement. So I have 30 mLs of epoxy mixed up. This is highly, highly bubbly. It's so cold that I can see my breath. I'm waiting for the heat to kick in. So I've got my epoxy slightly heated. There is such thing as getting your epoxy bottle too close to the heater. I don't know if you can see that big, huge bubble right there. Last night I was not paying attention and I had it too close, and it could have been really, really ugly and got epoxy everywhere. So there are tons of micro bubbles, so I'm really only gonna coat the glitter part, which I wanted that nice and thick anyways, because I don't wanna have to heat up my water slide very much because it will ruin it, because I figured that out whenever I was tinkering at the beginning. So make sure you have something protecting your surface. You can see that paper underneath there. That's from about 6 cups worth of ink and epoxy, and that's it. Glitter. There's glitter stuck in there, but that doesn't really matter. That won't ruin your countertop. So I want this really, really thick because, like I've said a couple of times, I'm on a time crunch, so I don't really have a lot of time to play with the thin layer, thin layer, thin layer sand or anything like that. I need to really try and knock it out within just the couple of layers, because I still have to do the decal and the top coat. It's really early, so I'm kind of having a hard time thinking. I wish I could blame it on that. It's really, I have a hard time thinking all the time. So I'm just coating that thoroughly. I'm gonna go back and check it in just a minute to make sure I didn't miss any spots. But patting that down after it's been turning for a little bit makes all the difference in the world on how smoothly this process goes, because if you have a lot that's sticking up, you're going to end up having a whole lot that you're going to need to like cut down or sand. Every once in a while I see a little crater and I want to fill it in. It's either a spot that I missed or a spot that didn't get enough clear coat. Make sure and give lots of attention right here. It's one of the hardest spots to get smooth. I think it's just because gravity doesn't allow the epoxy to hang on very well. I'll get that nice and level. I had time for my bubbles to pop a good bit, so I think I'll be okay doing the top. Alright, so that is good there. I'm just wiping off my finger that I just squeegeed that. It had a lot of bubbles in it, so I do not want it back in this cup. So I put it in another cup that I was mixing in earlier, well, seconds ago. To warm this up, I was pouring the epoxy from one cup to the other, trying to let the heat get to it. Definitely give lots of attention right there. That's the other spot that's really, really hard to get smooth. You want it to seal really well right there. One thing too, try not to get it in the rim. It's just gonna make your life a little easier not getting it too far into the rim, because you've got to use a blade to get that off of there. Whoa, that's going in. Got one stray piece of glitter. I do not want that in the middle if I can help it. Got that off of there. A piece of the fine glitter is not that big of a deal, but that chunky glitter, that's a little bit more of an eyesore if you don't have it kind of sprinkled throughout, making it look like it's supposed to spread up. It just doesn't go if it's just in the middle of nothing. So earlier in the video, I was sprinkling another glitter around the rim. I forgot to mention, I think actually it's because I had it on time lapse. That was it was the same color, but it was a different cut. I have several of the same colors in different cuts because they all do kind of a different overall look. It was called Bahama Mama, and it's actually the fine. It's the same as the fine that's in this Zoe. Right there, Bahama Mama. It's beautiful. I've actually done more than one cup where the Bahama Mama was the top and the Zoe was on the bottom, so it was kind of a monochromatic but still different. So I'm just going to pour the remaining epoxy right here on the chunky. I don't really feel like I need to address the rim right this minute. just so that's nice and loaded down. Alright, so before I walk away from this, I am going to go ahead and embossing gun the bubbles. Some people would use a heat torch, or an actual torch, I mean. I don't have one of those. I don't feel like I need it yet. I don't feel like I have too much of a problem, but as we get into winter and I'm doing these outside now, that may change. Just using a it's not a heat gun, it's an embossing gun from Joann's. It's been thoroughly used for the past year. It's covered in epoxy and ink. So I'm gonna blast that really quick. It's a little annoying, but I've got a few air bubbles I need to address right there. If those bubbles don't pop, it's gonna be very, very obvious. And if they pop when your epoxy is almost, when it's somewhat cured, not completely cured, it won't pop when they're completely cured, but if it pops later in the process, it makes very obvious fisheye looking patches. I'm gonna turn off my heater so this will work better. I'm pulling a little bit too much amps out here. I feel like I have a little lump right there. That off of there. Especially when I address any air bubbles that are up here on the water slide, those are the most obvious. Air bubbles on your glitter are not nearly as apparent and not as big of a problem. But the air bubbles on the water slide, it's definitely an eyesore. I do my best to try not to let that slide. I'm sure I've missed at least a couple air bubbles over an image that shouldn't have made it, but anyways, that is all I'm gonna do for the moment. I'm gonna turn the heat lamp towards it so that I can allow it to cure at the more stable temperature. Like I said, it's cold here. I could see my breath before my heater kicked in. I kind of dialed it down a bit. This is pretty smooth. It's looking pretty great. I'm pretty happy with it. If this ends up smooth enough here, I'll probably go ahead and sand it and then epoxy, sand it, wash it, decal it, and then epoxy it again and see how it feels. I may end up needing to do one more layer of epoxy. I'm almost certain that I will. I've never been able to get away with chunky without 2 good layers on it, but this was probably the flattest lay down I've ever had. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. I've got to figure out how I'm going to cover that because I'm not thrilled. So anyways, that is all I'm going to do for now. Kind of digging that right there. For some reason, it makes me think of Dolly Parton. I have no idea why, but I'm digging it. So we'll be back in a little while to do the rest. So our epoxy is cured that we put on just a little bit ago. Excuse my mess hands. I hydro dipped a minute ago and didn't even think to put on a glove. So we have our decal here. I cut it intentionally big enough right here to do my best to hide that. So I'm going to focus on this right here. Got a stray piece of glitter on there. So we are going to do that right there. We're just going to smooth it out just like that. I'll go slowly because sometimes on these curves, it's really, really easy to get bubbles in there and get little wrinkles. Probably wrinkles more than bubbles, but one is just as big of a pain in the butt to deal with as the other. So we've got that on there. We're going to use our little scraper from our scrapbooking stuff. I just want to make sure it's nice and on there. I'm not scraping it hard because I don't want to leave indentations on that vinyl. It's just foil vinyl, so I feel like foil vinyl is fairly fragile as far as scratching goes. So that was pretty perfect. There is the tiniest spot right there. Tiny, tiny. But otherwise, this vinyl is very, very similar to the iridescence of the glitter. So I'm pretty pleased with it. I was really, really worried about it there for a bit. I think just to save my own sanity, I'm gonna glue like one piece of flat, chunky glitter right up against it, and then we're gonna clear coat this whole thing. But that's it. I'm not really gonna do anything else on this tutorial just because that pretty much did it. This other seam is hardly visible at all. That's pretty good. All right, hopefully that helps somebody. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop a comment. I try and get those notifications cleared out as soon as I get them. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Also, if you like what you're seeing, please, please, please hit subscribe. That helps me out a lot, and you'll see what I upload next. Thanks so much. Have a good one.